Hi guys, it's Christy again. As you've probably noticed, there haven't been videos for several weeks, and that's because I've been on vacation getting some much needed R&R. But today I thought I would get back in the saddle, both figuratively and literally, by painting this 100 Years War mounted knight from Frontrank Figures for you. This is kind of a good model because I had some requests for how to paint horses like this, so a horse with barding or caparisons on, because all the ones I've done up until now have just been kind of plain horses, and this is going to be a little bit different. And painting something like this is really a lot of fun too, because you can do a lot of interesting things with colors or designs if you want to. Now, obviously, this is a two-part video because it's a cavalry figure, and those just take a lot more time. So this week I'll be doing the horse, and then next week I'll be focusing on the knight. And I've also done quite a few sort of guys in medieval armor before, so in order to mix that up a little bit, I'm going to be trying to paint this knight using non-metallic metal techniques, which is something, of course, that a lot of people have definitely been asking me about. And so I'm going to try and show you how to do that. And just disclaimer on that, I'm myself really very much still learning how to paint non-metallic metal. That's a long, complicated process, and getting good at it takes a while. So this is by no means going to be sort of a definitive video on how to do that. But, you know, if you're interested in kind of seeing me kind of puzzle through that process, then hopefully this will turn out to be interesting. But again, that's all going to be next week. We're going to work on the knight later, one thing at a time. Today, I'm just going to be focusing on the horse, and I'm going to just go ahead and get started with that now. Alright, so as always, to begin with, here are all the colors of paint that you're going to need for the first part of this tutorial. So that's basically everything involved with painting the horse and the caparison, or the sort of blanket that covers the horse. Now, obviously, not very much of the horse's actual skin is showing on this model, but there's still a little bit you have to paint, like the ears and the legs and the muzzle. I'm going to go for just a fairly straightforward brown horse here, so I'm going to be applying a base coat to those areas of German camouflage black-brown from Vallejo. And again, even though we're not dealing with a big area here, I still want to take my time and get some good, definition and build up the color in a nice subtle way, because that always looks better on horses. So my first layer here is going to be a mixture of the German camouflage black-brown with some flat brown, which is kind of a nice red-brown shade, and I think that makes just a pretty tone for a horse's skin. And now I'm moving on to just pure flat brown. You can notice that I'm going to start sort of accentuating the musculature of the horse as best as I can. There's not a whole lot showing here, but sort of the ankles and the joints of the legs, you want to sort of accentuate any sort of veins or sort of sinews, just any musculature that really is kind of popping out on the horse. And of course on the face, all the lips and the area around the muzzle and things like that. You'll notice that I'm leaving the tail alone for now because I want to do it a little differently. And because this is a war horse, it's also got pretty shaggy hair around its hooves and feet, and I'm going to also not worry too much about painting that for the moment. I mean, I'm going to get a little paint on it while I'm doing this, but I'm not really going to focus on painting it yet. As my final highlight on the horse's flesh, I've taken some cork brown and I've mixed it into the flat brown, and I'm going to use that just again to really accentuate those areas where, I think there should be, more dimension, like again on the joints and on sort of areas of the legs. Depending on what you feel like, you can do a couple layers of this, add in sort of progressively more of the cork brown to get a lighter shade, especially around the eyes and the lips and nose and ears. You're really going to want to, accentuate with some of the sort of lighter colors, just so that there's some good dimension and you get a little bit of sort of contrast going on the horse's skin. At this point, if you made a mess while painting the tail and hair on the feet, you're going to want to go back and clean that up with some German camouflage black brown. Once that's all smooth and even, it's time to apply a wash. And I'm going to go in now with Citadel Nuln Oil, and I'm going to apply a pretty thick, heavy layer really all over the sort of areas with hair and really build that up a lot. Once the Nuln Oil has dried, I'm going to kind of lightly overbrush sort of the top surfaces of the hairy areas, or at least where light is hitting in the case of the feet, with just some more of the flat brown, or if you want you can even go a little bit lighter. But you really want to apply this with a light touch. Put some paint on your brush, wipe most of it sort of off on your palette, and then just really lightly apply. Then once that's dry, it's time to go back in with washes again. I started out first with a Citadel Agrex Earthshade wash, which is kind of just a nice deep brown. And again, I applied that real heavily to all of the hair areas and let it dry. And that just is just more for tone and to build up some different color in there. Once that was done, I went back again with the Nuln Oil wash, and then I used it to shade selectively. So on the feet, I kind of applied it down sort of in the area where the sort of that ankle or that bulge at his feet kind of goes in, sort of to emphasize that, and also around the sort of dividing line between that area with the hair and the lighter skin. So that's just all for definition and emphasis. And on the tail, I put really heavy wash of black to the underside, and I kept building that up over several layers so you get some real clear shading. So you've got real clear dark sort of bottom to the tail, and then it's still really dark on top, but it's noticeably more darker on the bottom. And this technique with washes I found to be the kind of the easiest way to deal with horses' manes and tails. And if you want, you can go back into with some more overbrushes carefully to add more highlight and stuff, but you probably want to still finish those areas with a light wash at least, just to kind of unify everything when you're finished. Now I'm going to quickly paint the hooves. I'm just using some black here. I'm also going to use that black to fill in the horse's eyeballs. And yeah, nothing really difficult here. I'm going to be highlighting the hooves now by mixing a little bit of dark sea gray into my black to create sort of a highlight tone, and I'm going to carefully sort of layer that and build it up on the hooves. You can, of course, apply several layers to get some more sort of lighter, shinier areas. And at least on this horse, one of the hooves is lifted in such a way that you can see a horseshoe underneath. So I'm going to be painting that in a lighter gray shade and kind of building up some lighter gray highlights on it as well. Even a little bit of really pale sort of sky gray on there as sort of a shine almost. And you'll probably want to use your sky gray here as well, just to put a teeny dot of white in each of the eyeballs, and that's just sort of a reflection there, and it's kind of what brings the eyes to life so that they don't just look dead and scary and stuff like that. And now I'm going to start focusing on really the main sort of thing in this part of the tutorial, which is painting the caparison, or that sort of blanket that covers basically the entire horse. You could go with all kinds of colors here, and obviously what you do with this is going to depend on what you want. So, you know, maybe if you're doing a historical army, you want to research the certain colors or heraldry that are historically appropriate, or you can just really let your imagination go wild and do all kinds of really crazy, intricate design work on here. There's a lot of possibilities with such a big, open area, and you know, it's really up to you. I decided to opt for something that would be graphically interesting, but also achievable, not like overly complicated or time-consuming, something that I think most people could do. And the other thing I wanted to do here was show you how to paint a color that I don't work with very much, so I decided I would make the caparison orange with a design on it, because orange is a color I don't cover very much, and it is a little bit tricky to work with. So I'm going to be base coating that entire area here with a mixture of the Vallejo flat brown and some Vallejo orange brown. And you can see, because I'm working over black, you're going to need to apply probably several coats to get a nice even look, just because all these orange shades really have pretty bad coverage. And here I'm really just sort of continuing to go over the surface just to get a more sort of even tone. I have mixed a little bit more of the orange brown in to get slightly lighter shade. Orange is definitely one of those colors where you want to be real slow and careful in building up your layers. And when you're doing a big surface like this caparison, it really shows a lot, and that you get a good even blend is super duper important. So to make that easy, you really want to keep your sort of layers thin and smooth and gradual. And you'll notice that everything looks really shiny here, and that is because of the paint. I don't know what it is, but like my orange brown that I have here, it's like going bad, or it's an old batch or something, and the medium is kind of breaking down or separating. So it really is dried that shiny. It's like high gloss on there. Don't worry though, it makes it a little difficult to see what's going on, but it will be corrected eventually. And now I've just moved on to just pure orange brown here, and I am again just sort of really starting now to kind of pick out and define highlights on the surface. The thing I've observed with orange paint is it has really bad pigmentation, and I actually haven't found any manufacturer who manages to have orange with good pigmentation in it. So you have to be very careful how you apply. You have to keep your layers thin, and you have to really pay attention when you're applying it that everything is smooth and even. You're not going to get like good coverage at all. But what you want to make sure is when you do apply a layer that the paint is smooth, so that you don't have any sort of clumping or bunching or areas where there's sort of more concentrated pigmentation versus other areas where it's more uneven. Because if you let that happen, it's going to be a lot harder later on to go and fix that. It's much easier just to make sure that you've got sort of a consistent, smooth, really kind of thin, patchy application of paint than that you have one where you have sort of heavy areas mixed in with lighter, thinner areas. And with the orange, it's such a difficult color to work with. You're going to end up with that a little bit anyway, but you need to constantly do everything you can to minimize that. So you can see, like anytime I'm blending, I'm applying the lighter color to areas where I expect light to be hitting, and kind of then pulling it out and blending it down into the folds and creases. And at least with something like this caparison, where you've got these really big dramatic sort of folds, it's very easy to see where that needs to happen, but they're really big areas that you're working with, so it's pretty time consuming getting everything nice and smooth looking. And because of just like sort of the poor pigmentation that you're going to be dealing with all orange paints, you're going to really find yourself applying a lot of layers of the same color kind of until you've kind of reached the maximum possible saturation. And that's especially true since we're working over a fairly dark base coat. So I'm really going to now be continuing on with that orange brown for several more layers at least, and you know, just building it up progressively. You want to be really careful not to really leave very many areas at all with the original base color showing, because it's going to just look, when we get completely done, it's going to look too dark relative to everything else. So you really want to sort of be smoothing the higher colors over top of it. It's just you don't want to apply as many layers at this point over the shadow areas. And of course, as we go higher and higher with the orange, we're not going to be putting it down in the recesses at all after a while. But for now, it's still important to keep kind of going over pretty much all areas of the model, but just applying more heavier layers to the areas where we, you know, eventually want there to be stronger highlights. And here now I'm applying kind of my really last layer at this point of the orange brown. It's kind of reached sort of the maximum that I can get out of it really at this point. But I'm really now just building it up over sort of the highest, brightest areas on the model. The fact that this orange brown is drying so glossy is also really making it kind of difficult for me to see what I'm doing, which is actually kind of frustrating. So if I was to do this again, I would probably avoid this color, but I guess I didn't know how bad it was going to be when I started working with it. But it shouldn't be a trouble to find other similar shades that will work the same and not have this kind of really ridiculous kind of gloss effect going on. I'm now moving on to a totally different shade of orange. This is Jokero orange from Citadel. It's a slightly different shade than the orange brown, but I'm going to go ahead and start layering it over top. You can see it isn't, at least initially, going to be making a huge difference in tone, but it's slightly changing things. And the big advantage of the Jokero orange, it's a base coat, by the way, so it's got pretty good coverage, at least for orange, certainly. Is that at least it's dry and matte. So by applying this, I'm already really helping cut down the shine a lot, making a lot of things easier for me. But what I'm doing again is I'm always sort of starting out applying the paint to the sort of the highlighted areas of the fabric, sort of the tops of the folds and creases, and always sort of pulling it down and thinning, and so into a thinning, ever thinning layer down into those folds and creases. And always just, really emphasizing areas where I want light to be hitting. I found with the Jokero orange that the coverage was really pretty good, and I actually did not need to build up too many layers of this paint. Just one or maybe two in some places was enough to really get kind of as much saturation as I wanted. I think I might have almost been able to really skip using the orange brown and kind of just work with the Jokero orange kind of straight away, and that probably actually would have produced better results for me, but live and learn. At this point, I am now going to start layering on Citadel Fire Dragon Orange. Now, unlike the base shade, the Jokero Orange, Fire Dragon Orange is a very, very, very bright, almost neon orange shade. It's a layer color, and it is extremely difficult to work with, as is the case often with these very bright, intense looking colors. That is to say, they look intense in the bottle, but when you put them on the model, it's usually a different story. The pigmentation in this paint is extremely poor. It's very patchy, and so actually, getting an effect with this color means that you have to apply lots and lots of thin layers, and they have to be thin because you have to make sure that you're getting an even layer, because if you don't do that, it's very easy with this color to get sort of blobby effects where you're going to get places where you get sort of a blob clump of build-up pigment, and then areas where there's basically no pigmentation at all. So you have to spend a lot of time really smoothing this color, making sure it's even, and that's half of what I'm doing here. Besides the blending, it's almost more just time spent sort of evening out the layers of paint. And I don't know how many layers of this Fire Dragon Orange I ended up applying to get the brightness that I wanted, but it was quite a few, 3, 4, maybe even 5 layers, just going back over and over again and very gradually sort of lightening and sort of brightening the areas that I really wanted to highlight on the model. Now for my next layer, I mixed some Vallejo basic skin tone, which is kind of a peachy skin shade, into the Fire Dragon Orange, and that allows me to get this extra light, bright highlight. It also has the advantage of it kind of helps the sort of pigmentation and coverage a lot of the Fire Dragon Orange. It just will suddenly start covering a lot better when you mix that other better, pigmented paint into it. And I'm just going to start now kind of applying this as a sort of an extreme highlight to areas where I really want the folds and creases to look bright. Unlike the shades before, you can really build this up, and I'm really using this kind of like an edge highlight to really emphasize areas where there's a lot of light hitting. And you can certainly do this in steps too. I ended up kind of mixing in more of the basic skin tone later to get an even lighter peachier shade, which I then really used on sort of the edges and really bright areas where I really wanted it to be smooth and, you know, really kind of stand out and get some really good contrast going. This color is, you'll notice, light enough relative to sort of what we've applied so far that you do need to spend a reasonable amount of time kind of really blending it and kind of smoothing it into the other colors to make it look good. You could probably prevent a little of this just by being a little bit more gradual with sort of the amount you add into the Fire Dragon orange, but at this point I was getting kind of well and thoroughly tired of kind of layering orange and not really getting anywhere very quickly, so I kind of cheated a little bit and went for a bigger step, and you know, then I had to spend a little bit more time with getting the blending smooth, but you know, after a while it all sort of evened out. Now I'm going to take some of the flat brown and I mixed it with a bit of the Jacaro orange, and I'm going to use that now kind of nice and thin to kind of carefully plot out the design that I want to have on the caparison. And what I'm doing is I'm sort of dividing both the back and sort of the front half of the caparison into sort of 4 quadrants on either side, and then 2 of the quadrants kind of on either side are then going to have sort of a striped pattern in them, and I'm using the paint here to just roughly plot that out. Now the areas without any sort of diagonal lines on them on the caparison are just kind of going to stay the orange base coat, but the areas that with the stripes, I'm going to sort of paint these kind of white lines going across, and I'm going to be base coating those areas using some dark sky gray again. That has the advantage of having really nice good coverage here over the orange, so it makes it really easy to plot that out. I'm also going to be using the same color to base coat his bridle, which has sort of got a cloth cover on it, and I also want that to be white. I'm going to just be real dramatic here and just go with this orange and white color scheme, but you could easily, you know, introduce another color here into the stripes if you want to get even more fancy. At this point, you do want to be trying to, for the most part, cover up those orange guidelines. You know, you don't really want much of that showing. I was fairly rough and sloppy when I applied them, and so you don't really want that kind of to be showing too much in your finished model. Now I'm going to go back in with some Vallejo Sky Gray, and I'm going to start highlighting the white stripes that I applied. And I'm just like before with the orange, going to be kind of building it up here. You know, starting out with a relatively thin, even layer, kind of going down into the deep folds, and then once that's kind of on there and dry, I'm going to go back in and layer more sort of layers of paint, I guess, over top, but especially focusing on the areas where I want it to be brighter, where it's kind of not down in a shadow or a fold. And if you do it that way, you can get a fairly seamless transition between the areas you want highlighted and the areas that you want darker, but still just working with one color of paint. And this is always pretty much the approach that I use when I'm dealing with white things. Just kind of go slowly, take your time, you know, kind of carefully build up those layers, kind of carefully smooth and kind of blend them out as you go. And you know, you want to spend some time to really make sure the edges, particularly of the stripes, are neat and smooth and even, kind of where they sort of hit the edges of those sort of panels that they're in. I actually spent some time with a lighter orange color, which you could, you know, make by mixing the basic skin tone with some Fire Dragon orange, for example, and I used that to sort of clean up and smooth out some of those dark guidelines a little bit where they were too thick or uneven. I sort of painted over them, or at least thinned them down. I kind of like the way they look, just to have those dark orange dividing lines. So I leave them, I kind of left them there faintly because it kind of indicates sort of a divide in the fabric where there's like different panels. So you don't have to get rid of those entirely. But you know, you do probably want to smooth them out and even them out a little bit. And also, of course, as I apply these lighter highlights over the stripes. It's nice to leave just a little bit of the dark base, the dark, dark sky gray or sea gray showing around the edges a little bit, because that just adds a little bit of extra dimension and kind of sharpness to the look of the whole thing. So you don't even really need to cover that all up. It's, it's just nice if there's a little bit kind of peeking out here and there to help define the stripes. Now I'm just continuing to highlight the stripes even further. Now I've mixed white into my sky gray, and I'm just going through the same procedure, applying the paint in a thin, even layer, kind of blending it out down into any deep recesses or folds, and then just applying several successive layers to kind of add sort of gradual layers of highlights where I want it to look really extra bright and shiny. And now I'm going to finish off the whole highlighting of the stripes process using just pure white paint, doing exactly what I just did with the last two steps, sort of building up successive layers of the white, getting, brighter and brighter, sort of on areas that I really, want to emphasize. And being as this is white paint, you can tend to go quite far with this and really put on tons and tons of layers kind of before you hit maximum saturation. So it's really up to you how much you want to do. And if this ends up looking a little bit more gray than white, that's fine too. I think kind of light gray stripes are almost equally as pretty in this case. So if you don't really want it to be pure blinding white, that would, look okay too. And again, if you didn't feel like dealing with white here, because painting white is a pain in the ass, of course, and we already did do that orange, which is really also a pain in the ass, you could choose to do the stripes in another, it's probably easier to paint color. There's probably a lot of other shades, like maybe blue, that would probably complement the orange here really nicely. And don't forget, as you work along and highlight the stripes, to keep also adding the same sort of layers and highlights to that bridle as you are to the rest of the caparison. Now I'm going to base coat this saddle and his stirrups, which I all want to be kind of a leather color. The saddle may actually be made out of wood in this case, but I like the idea of it kind of at least being leather covered, or I don't know, I think that's easier to deal with. So anyway, I'm just going to be base coating those areas using German camouflage black brown again. Now I'm going to be highlighting the saddle and the stirrups. I'm first going to apply a layer of chocolate brown, which is what I usually use as my first highlight on leather. I just kind of apply it to the lighter areas and kind of then blend downward. You have kind of an advantage here because you've got the knight sitting on his saddle. It's really, really easy to tell what areas sort of need to be in deep shadow. And there's a lot of areas you don't have to worry about painting. Once I've got that chocolate brown on, I then went back in with a bit of cork brown mixed into my chocolate brown and applied a sort of another highlight layer. And at this point, I'm going to really start focusing on sort of really areas where light is hitting, but also areas where I want it to be like there's some wear on the leather, areas that he might have rubbed or touched or getting abraded a lot. So you want to build up extra sort of light areas there. And I'm going to continue that process then with a slightly lighter variant of the color I already have. So I'm just going to mix more cork brown in basically to what I'm working with. And then I'm going to continue with a layer of kind of pure cork brown, and by that point I'm really going to be focusing on areas where I want there to be wear or really bright highlights, and not definitely applying that very selectively, definitely not everywhere. And then you can finish up with a final really high highlight if you want. I made that by mixing the basic skin tone into the cork brown, and that was just to put sort of a really careful thin edge highlight sort of around the edges of the saddle, and also just sort of on some of the corners and stuff where, you know, I wanted there to be lots of abrasion and just, you know, an extra sort of accent. And you can even be a little rough and streaky when you do this to kind of simulate the idea of the leather having some sort of wear or sort of scratches or sort of an uneven finish type thing going on. The only real thing left to paint now on the horse is the bit. And as I said, we're going to be doing non-metallic metal in the night, so we need to kind of follow through on the horse with that too. So I'm base coating this with a mixture of black and the dark sea gray. I'm then going to take pure dark sea gray, and I'm going to sort of kind of use that to apply highlights to the metal where I kind of imagine a light would be hitting, but I'm not going to overdo it because I don't want this getting too light, and the areas that you want to let get really light gray here, you want to keep to a minimum. My next layer is then just sky gray, and that is really just sort of a highlight accent color, and I'm really going to apply it sort of areas where you expect a little shine. I mean, I'm not really going to go into the non-metallic metal here, but this is such a small, tiny like area that you really won't see very much, so you can really wing it at this point, and you don't really need a lot of understanding of the whole process to do it. If you want, you can even dot on some white just on the very top center as kind of an extreme shine highlight, depending on how bright you want the metal to look. Okay, so at this point, the horse and the caparison covering the horse is basically finished. I went back in and did a little bit of further refining on the orange. I took some pure basic skin tone and I used it as a very thin extreme edge highlight just to further emphasize some sharp creases and folds, particularly around the horse's muzzle, around on its head, and just in the area and sort of in the divisions between the panels of fabrics and on some really sharp creases. You can really continue fiddling with this type of thing endlessly, and I may even later on off camera do a little bit more tweaking, because things like this, you know, if you really want them to look good and you want to get the best result, they take a lot of time and refinement and, you know, constant corrections. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this came out. Orange is a really tricky color to work with no matter how you slice it, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that almost nobody makes a good orange. There's really no paint manufacturer who does a good bright orange. It's always going to be kind of difficult to work with. So it's going to take you some patience and effort, and mostly just patience, I think, to get a good result with this shade. And the more you refine it, the more you work with it, the more that will kind of be rewarded. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. You found it useful. Please tune in next week so that we can go over how to paint the knight and his armor with non-metallic metal as promised. And as of course, like this, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time.